Since the appearance of the first predatory animals on our planet, the struggle for the title of the most dangerous creature began. This race continued after life reached land, but some animals decided that they should begin to explore the airspace. After this, the struggle for the upper levels of the food pyramid also spread to the sky. And today, we'll talk about those animals that became the real masters of the sky of their time. Subscribe to our channel so you'll know about the release of new videos before others. We also encourage all our viewers to actively support the Age of Dinosaurs channel with likes and comments. This will help in the development of the channel and will allow our releases to be seen by as many users as possible. The first animals that began to explore the airspace were arthropods. And among them, undoubtedly, the most formidable predator was the giant dragonfly, Meganora. According to various estimates, its wingspan reached 60 to 70 centimeters. In earlier studies, this parameter was estimated even at 1 meter. For the Carboniferous period, this flying predator was a real monster. Although debates about the lifestyle, diet, and other behavioral features of the Meganora are still ongoing, there's also a lot of controversy about the size of insects of that time. Some scientists express the opinion that with such dimensions, Meganora simply could not fly. But don't forget that 300 million years ago, the oxygen content in the atmosphere was much higher. The primitive respiratory system of insects could work much more efficiently than it does now. In addition, we only know about Meganora from imprints on fossils, and some details of the structure of their body may be unknown to modern scientists. The habitat of these giant dragonflies was humid jungles and wetlands. Moreover, scientists are not entirely sure whether the Meganora larvae led an aquatic lifestyle, like modern dragonflies, but data suggests that the larvae were large in size, had a high speed of movement, and were no less voracious than adults. And given the size of this dragonfly, its prey wasn't just only other insects. It's quite possible that the Meganora's diet included small fish and amphibians. Gradually, arthropods began to lose their leading position, and in the Permian period, animal lizards began to move to the first positions. The most advanced group of that time were the synapsids. They became the ancestors of dinosaurs, crocodiles, and other reptiles. And it was among the synapsids that the first reptiles appeared and began to master flight. These pioneers were the Weigeltosaurus. The first fossils of these unusual lizards were discovered in Germany. Similar finds were also made in Madagascar, the British Isles, and Russia. Many parts of the body of Weigeltosaurus were arranged almost the same as those of modern lizards, but in addition, they had a unique mechanism, which scientists call a flying membrane. This is the first that this device has been found. The flying membrane consisted of sets of side rods connected by membranes. Recent studies show that in their structure, these outgrowths are osteoderms and resemble elements of the shell of modern crocodiles. Of course, with the help of such a simple mechanism, it was impossible to fly in the full sense of the word. Most likely, Weigeltosaurus only glided from one tree to another. The real masters of the sky appeared on Earth only with the advent of the era of dinosaurs. They became pterosaurs, a group of flying lizards related to dinosaurs. Most of them ate exclusively fish, but among them, at different times, truly gigantic creatures still appeared. Some of them should be discussed in more detail. Dimorphodon. The increase in the size of flying lizards was gradual, and the largest of them appeared closer to the end of the Cretaceous period. Therefore, Dimorphodon and its relatives can be considered the lords of the sky of the early Jurassic period. The name of this pterosaur means two kinds of teeth. The name was given to it in 1859 by naturalist Richard Owen. Since the division of teeth according to shape and purpose is extremely uncharacteristic for reptiles, the body length of Dimorphodon was about 1 meter, and the wingspan was about 145 centimeters. Caelestibintus. In 2018, an even earlier representative of the Dimorphodondid family was described. The celestial's beak contained teeth of as many as 3 different types. This pterosaur, large by Triassic standards, lived in the state of Utah in the USA. Its wingspan was about 1.5 meters. Like other members of the family, the Caelestibintus had an elongated skull with a large beak. Their nostrils were triangular in shape and located close to their eyes. It was also one of the few pterosaurs that could look forward rather than to the sides. Rhamphorhynchus. The niche now occupied by seabirds like gulls was occupied by Rhamphorhynchus in the Jurassic. It's believed that this family included 3 species, but some scientists express the opinion that all the found remains could belong to representatives of the same species of different ages. There are studies confirming this hypothesis for Rhamphorhynchus found in Germany. Also, traces of the presence of these pterosaurs have been found almost throughout Europe and North Africa. They lived from 162 to 145 million years ago. The wingspan of the largest individuals could reach almost 2 meters. Like all piscivorous pterosaurs, Rhamphorhynchus had an elongated beak with sharp, long teeth. A distinctive feature of this family was a long tail with a diamond-shaped tassel at the end. Pterodactyl. This species of flying lizard became the first pterosaur discovered in the history of science. 2 separate finds were made in Germany at the end of the 18th century. At different times, these fossils were attributed either to flying creatures, then to extinct crustaceans, or to winged mammals like bats. Over the next 200 years, all pterosaurs found were classified as pterodactyls. The approach to their classification changed only at the beginning of the 20th century. At the moment, only 2 species are considered pterodactyls. These small pterosaurs were distributed throughout Europe and Africa during the Jurassic period, approximately 150 to 165 million years ago. The wingspan of the largest of them reached 1 meter, and the body length did not exceed 60 centimeters. They weighed no more than 2 kilograms. And the largest flying creatures of the era of dinosaurs, and indeed the entire history of the planet, belonged to the Azhdarchid family and lived at the end of the Cretaceous period. It's still a mystery to many how these giants were able to fly at all, but it's very likely that even with their enormous size, all giant pterosaurs had very small, relative to size, mass. The largest representatives of this family were the following animals. Tropaeonathus. This is a separate genus of pterosaurs from the Ornithoceridae family. It was discovered less than 40 years ago in Brazil. The age of the find dates back to the beginning of the Cretaceous period, approximately 110 million years ago. So far, only 1 species is classified as Tropaeonathus. Its wingspan definitely exceeded 8 meters, and the height of this lizard could reach 170 centimeters. According to some estimates, Tropaeonathus could weigh up to 100 kilograms. Therefore, it's believed that they could take off only after a short run. Tropaeonathus had a rather interestingly shaped beak. At its end, there were large vertical thickenings. This peculiar keel gave the name to this pterosaur. Literally, it translates as keeled jaw. Scientists believe that Tropaeonathus hunted by dipping its beak into the water while flying. The presence of a keel prevented the beak from yawning along the course. Inside its mouth were thin, sharp teeth, perfectly adapted for catching and holding fish. But perhaps Tropaeonathus did not disdain baby dinosaurs and other small land animals. Thanatos dragon. This pterosaur is considered the largest flying creature in the history of South America. Its name means dragon of death. The species name of this lizard also contains the name of the ancient god of the Peruvian Indians, Amaru. The remains of 2 individuals of the new pterosaur were discovered in Argentina in 2022. After studying them, the wingspan of this giant was estimated at 7 to 9, and its height was 3.5 meters. The fossils found are very fragmentary. Therefore, scientists know very little about Thanatos dragons so far. The age of the finds estimated at approximately 86 to 89 million years. Quetzalcoatlus. This genus from the Azhdarchid family was discovered and described much earlier than most of its relatives. Therefore, it is the best known and most studied of them. They lived in North America around 66 to 68 million years ago. The first fossilized remains of Quetzalcoatlus were found in the United States in 1971. Initially, its wingspan was estimated at 15 to 20 meters, but later studies showed that this parameter was no more than 11 to 12 meters. But even so, this lizard became the largest flying creature in the history of the planet. While on land, Quetzalcoatlus had a height comparable to modern giraffes. This is about 5.5 meters. The most heated debate is still ongoing over the body mass of this giant. Various researchers voice figures from 70 to 540 kilograms. Built in 1984, the flying model weighed about 80 kilograms. This aircraft was created to simulate the flight of Quetzalcoatlus. It was controlled by a simple computer autopilot and showed good aerodynamic capabilities of large pterosaurs. But still, most scientists agree that in order to fly, such giants needed a runway or a high launch pad, a rock or a large tree. Cryodragon. This species of pterosaur lived in what is now Canada, approximately 76.5 million years ago. It was for this reason that they were given a family name, meaning frosty or ice dragon. The specific name Boreas is the name of the ancient Greek god of the north wind. Also, when describing and choosing the name of a new species from the Azhdarchid family, an option was considered to call it Cryodragon Viserys. This was the name of one of the dragons in the series of books by George R.R. Martin and the TV series Game of Thrones based on them. It was this dragon that was killed by the Night King and turned into an ice one. The remains of this giant lizard were discovered back in 1972, but then they were described as just another Quetzalcoatl. The error was corrected only in 2019, when a group of scientists re-examined the find. As a result, several differences between the cryodragon and its related Quetzalcoatlus were discovered. The wingspan of the found individual was about 5 meters, but scientists believe this pterosaur was not yet fully grown. It's believed that its maximum wingspan could be approximately 2 times greater, and adult ice dragons could weigh up to 250 kilograms. Hatzegopteryx. This large European pterosaur was related to Quetzalcoatlus. It lived in Romania at the very end of the Cretaceous period. In terms of wingspan, Hatzegopteryx is quite comparable to its overseas relative, but their height was slightly shorter due to their shorter and more powerful neck. This feature of the body may also indicate differences in the way of nutrition. With such a body structure, this predator could hunt not only fish and small animals, but large dinosaurs could also be prey. Arenbergiana. This type of pterosaur was discovered in the early 40s of the last century, but scientists currently have very few fossils to describe it in detail. Initial studies showed that the wingspan of this lizard was even greater than that of the Quetzalcoatlus, but later descriptions reduced this size to just about 7 to 9 meters. Undoubtedly, Azhdarchids are the largest flying creatures in the entire history of the Earth, but at the same time, creatures such as Pteranodontus lived with them and competed with them. These piscivorous pterosaurs lived in the United States and Japan. Their wingspan couldn't exceed 7 meters. The main distinguishing feature of this group of pterosaurs was an elongated, sharp beak, completely devoid of teeth. But 66 million years later, all pterosaurs became extinct as a result of climate change across the planet caused by the fall of a huge meteorite. But only the most progressive group of flying dinosaurs, birds, managed to survive the cataclysm. The largest of them were flightless and even occupied the niche of top predators in some regions. But even among the flyers, there were their giants. They became the masters of the air elements and remain so to this day. About 25 million years ago, a genus of bird called Paleogornis appeared. They lived in Europe, North Africa, and both American continents. The name Paleogornis translates as seabird. In fact, these giants fully lived up to their name. It's believed that their lifestyle coincided with that of the wandering albatross now. This bird has the largest wingspan of any living species. It's up to 3.5 meters. The albatrosses weigh no more than 10 kilograms. The body length of Paleogornis was up to 2 meters, and the wingspan was up to 7.5 meters. They weighed from 20 to 32 kilograms. They had a skull of up to 60 centimeters long. A characteristic feature of these birds were bizarre outgrowths on the inner surface of the beak. These outgrowths vaguely resembled teeth and may have performed similar functions. Paleogornis became extinct about 2 million years ago. Another giant bird, Argentavis, lived in South America. It was first discovered in 1980 in Argentina, which is how it got its name. They lived in these places from 6 to 9 million years ago. With a height of just over 125 centimeters and a body length of about 2 meters, the wingspan of Argentavis was 5 to 6 meters. But the Argentavis were much more massive than Paleogornis. According to some estimates, their body weight could reach up to 70 kilograms. The length of their skull was up to 45 centimeters with a sharp hook-shaped beak. And based on its structure, scientists concluded that Argentavis was an active predator, not a scavenger. It's believed that the basis of its diet were large rodents. Researchers suggest that the bird fell onto a group of rodents from a great height. Then the predator simply swallowed the wounded or stunned animals. In many ways, scientists determined the appearance and habits of Argentavis by comparing it with the Andean condor or harpy eagle. Condors, although scavengers, are considered the most massive flying bird in the world. The weight of their males can reach 15 kilograms, and their wingspan is 3 meters. By studying their behavior, one can understand how such a heavy bird as Argentavis behaved in flight or set up nests. In harpies, females are larger. They can weigh up to 9 kilograms. The wingspan of this forest eagle from South America can be about 2 meters. The harpy is an active predator and is distinguished by great strength and a powerful beak. At one time, it was considered an honorable and dangerous prize among the local Indians, and the farmers simply waged a long war with them. After all, harpies easily dragged away poultry and even dogs. As a result, this predator is now listed in the Red Book. Modern birds, in comparison with their ancestors, are not large in size, and arthropods and reptiles now don't even think of rising high into the sky. But evolution doesn't stand still. Perhaps someday there will be creatures capable of displacing birds from their leading positions and becoming the new masters of the sky. But for now, the sky is increasingly roamed by man-made birds, created by the most dangerous predator, man. As is known, the first living organisms on Earth originated in water. Therefore, it was in the seas and oceans that after some time, the first predators appeared. And among them, in different eras, were the real masters of the underwater world. They belonged to different classes and families. Some of them even originated from land creatures that returned to the water. Today, we'll talk about the most interesting and largest aquatic creatures of different eras. Let's also try to figure out why they occupied the upper steps of the food pyramid. Until a certain time, there was no division among animals into predators and herbivores. The Ediacaran period is sometimes even compared on this basis to the biblical paradise, where all animals lived in peace with each other. But by the beginning of the Cambrian period, the evolution had divided all the inhabitants of the ocean into hunters and their prey, and the largest predator known to us, without a doubt, was Anomalocaris. Its name means unusual shrimp, but in fact, this arthropod has nothing to do with modern shrimp. According to various estimates, the body length of Anomalocaris could range from 38 to 100 centimeters. Some researchers claim that they could even grow up to 2 meters. With the help of lateral lobes and a flat, wide tail, these predators could swim above the ocean floor in search of prey. To control such a complex swimming mechanism, a very developed brain was required for those times. Long frontal appendages that acted as jaws made it possible to grab smaller animals and move them into the oral cone. Also, this super predator of the Cambrian seas had very developed vision. Scientists estimate that their vision were 30 times more powerful than that of trilobites. Namely, they were most likely the main food of Anomalocaris, although they could well eat their smaller relatives. All these adaptations and large size made Anomalocaris the most formidable predator of its time. Judging by the remains found, these creatures lived almost over the globe. At the moment, only 2 species have been described, but there are suggestions that there were at least 10 of them. It's just that not all available remains have been fully studied yet. But after a few tens of millions of years, mollusks entered the race for the upper steps of the food pyramid, and such a creature as Camarasaurus managed to achieve serious results. This ancestor of modern squids and octopuses lived in conical shells up to 10 meters long. Hidden inside such a shell was a powerful beak capable of crushing the most durable shells. To capture prey, this monster used tentacles more than 1 meter long. Camarasaurus lived in the seas of the Ordovician period, approximately 446 to 470 million years ago. Their traces have been found in Europe and both American continents. It's believed that as the organism grew, these mollusks gradually completed their shell. The free space was filled with some kind of gas that helped maintain the buoyancy of this huge tower. This is exactly how the shell of nautiluses that have survived to this day are constructed. Such a mechanism didn't allow fast swimming and maneuvering. Therefore, it's assumed that Camarasaurus used ambush tactics. True, in recent years, more and more researchers have expressed the opinion that they were not predators at all. Based on some signs, it could be assumed that these mollusks fed exclusively on plankton, and they did not have a beak. Despite this, Camarasaurus can still be called the masters of the seas and oceans of their time. It's doubtful that there were animals at that time capable of actively hunting such armored giants. But simultaneously with mollusks, arthropods continued to develop in the seas and oceans of the Paleozoic. The most effective predators among them were crustacean scorpions. The first of them appeared in the Cambrian period, and in the period from 470 to 410 million years ago, they reached their peak. That is, for 100 million years, cancer scorpions reigned in all the seas of the planet. The largest of them grew more than 2.5 meters in length. For such giants, everything that swam in the water and crawled along the bottom was easy prey. The body of the scorpion cancer was protected by powerful armor. Huge claws easily cut through the shells of other animals. At the same time, they were good swimmers. For this purpose, their hind limbs had a special shape. Later, only the smallest varieties remained, and even those moved to freshwater bodies of water. And after the Great Permian Extinction, not a single crustacean scorpion remained on Earth. Only those of them who managed to move to land were lucky. They gave rise to all living arachnids. During the dominance of crustaceans, the ancestors of modern fish also suffered from them. But already in the Devonian period, it was fish that became the dominant creatures in all seas and oceans. And the most terrible monster of that time can be considered Dunkleosteus. This fish became the first megapredator among vertebrates. Even the sharks that had already appeared during the existence of Dunkleosteus could not compete with it for the title of Master of the Ocean. According to various estimates, their length ranged from 6 to 9 meters, and later studies showed that the largest specimen found was slightly more than 4 meters in length. It's quite difficult to reliably estimate the size of Dunkleosteus. Most of the found skeletons of this fish are barely a quarter preserved. Scientists mainly have their heads and jaws at their disposal. Dunkleosteus is a gnathostome fish. In the seas of the Devonian period, the presence of full jaws in living creatures was very rare. Even in Dunkleosteus, there were 2 self-sharpening bone plates. This formidable predator also had no teeth at all. Therefore, it's believed that Dunkleosteus simply bit its prey in half. Only their larger relatives could pose a danger to these armored living torpedoes. Perhaps this predator used another interesting method of hunting. Research has shown that Dunkleosteus could open its terrible mouth in 20 milliseconds. This allowed him to draw in a large volume of water along with all living organisms at a terrible speed. Nowadays, some types of perch use a similar method. The fossilized remains of these fish are found in the USA, Canada, Morocco, Russia, and some European countries. Their age ranges from 358 to 382 million years. Currently, scientists have described about 10 species of these predatory fish. Only the Permian extinction put an end to their dominance in the seas. Together with Dunkleosteus, a huge number of representatives of marine fauna became extinct at the beginning of the Triassic period, and land dwellers began to take their place. Dinosaurs were just beginning to dominate there, and the lizards that moved into the water gave rise to a large number of diverse marine animals. Among these reptiles, there were many new rulers of the deep sea. Ichthyosaurs became the threat of the seas of the Triassic period. Some of them were adapted for fishing, others ate large animals, including their relatives. Among them, there were many real giants. One of these predators was the Thalattorchan. They lived in what are now the United States between 242 and 247 million years ago. Its length was about 8.5 meters. According to researchers, this ichthyosaur was one of the first Triassic creatures capable of feeding on prey of a similar size to itself. This style of feeding is commonly called macrophage feeding. The appearance of such predators just a few million years after the global extinction indicates the rapid restoration of the aquatic ecosystem. Another type of large ichthyosaur from the early Triassic period was Symbospondylus. Their name was a combination of words meaning bowl and vertebra. According to one version, it occurred due to the fact that miners in Nevada, where this lizard was discovered, used its vertebrae as plates. Different types of these sea lizards had a length from 4 to 10 meters, but the largest species of Symbospondylus grew up to even 17 meters. Their body was not yet fully adapted for swimming. The head of this predator could exceed 1 meter in length. The mouth had an elongated shape and was studded with small, sharp teeth. This made it possible to retain caught fish and shellfish, as well as grind the shells of various arthropods. But for swimming, Symbospondylus used a long, flattened tail, like modern iguanas or sea snakes. These early ichthyosaurs had not yet developed normal caudal and dorsal fins. And in the Jurassic period, ideal marine predators appeared in the shallow seas. Plesiosaurs. This order includes more than a dozen families, divided into 2 groups. Fish-eating plesiosaurs had a long neck and a relatively small head, and the more versatile pliosaurs had a large mouth and a short, powerful neck. But among the representatives of both groups, there were quite large creatures. For example, it was previously believed that one of the largest pliosaurs, Liopleurodon, weighed up to 150 tons and grew up to 25 meters. Later studies showed that the largest plesiosaurids only grew to 13 meters in length. When swimming, they used 4 lateral flippers, like modern sea turtles. To test their capabilities, a special robot was even designed that used a similar method for swimming. As a result, it turned out that the simultaneous flapping of the fins allowed the lizards to develop greater speed. and movements with different limbs allowed for quick maneuvers. It's noteworthy that Plesiosaurus, unlike their land and flying relatives, did not lay eggs. They were viviparous. This allowed them to not go to land and become more adapted to life in the water. The first plesiosaurs appeared approximately 203 million years ago, and they went extinct along with the dinosaurs about 66 million years ago. Towards the end of the Cretaceous period, new contenders for the title of Masters of the Ocean appeared. These were mosasaurs. At the moment, at least 5 species that belong to this family are known. These were large sea lizards with large skulls and powerful jaws. Their length ranged from 10 to 17 meters. The largest of them could weigh up to 15 tons. The remains of mosasaurs have been found on all continents, including Antarctica. This indicates their distribution throughout all the oceans of the planet. Like other described aquatic reptiles, mosasaurs descended from some land lizards. Their legs evolved into flippers. Moreover, the forelimbs were longer than the hind limbs. It's believed that these predators wriggled while swimming, like modern eels. Most mosasaurs were adapted to feed on fish, but the larger ones could well have hunted plesiosaurs and their smaller relatives. Scientists have also found shells of ancient turtles with traces of teeth. Perhaps these marks were left by mosasaurs. After the end of the era of dinosaurs and to this day, sharks and cetaceans compete for primacy in the seas and oceans. And if the first ones appeared in the Devonian period, then the second ones repeated the path of plesiosaurs, ichthyosaurs, and mosasaurs. The ancestors of whales were land mammals that lived in the coastal zone. Basilosaurus can be considered the most successful among ancient whales. Even though their name means royal lizard, basilosaurs were mammals. At first, the skeletons of these ancient cetaceans were mistaken for the remains of snake-like creatures. Their length was estimated at 30 meters. It's now believed that the largest basilosaurs grew only to 15 to 20 meters. At the same time, they were still larger in size than most aquatic inhabitants. Therefore, for several million years, basilosaurs were the dominant predators of the Earth's seas and oceans. Their fossilized remains are found in North America, the Middle East, and North Africa. These fossils are estimated to be 34 to 40 million years old. Essentially, basilosaurs are an intermediate link between land ungulates and modern whales. Their body acquired such enormous length due to elongated vertebrae, which may have been filled with fluid inside. It's believed that basilosaurs curved their bodies when swimming. Their hind limbs can only take 2 positions and could hardly help when moving in water. In terms of their internal structure, they are vestigial legs. Some scientists suggest that these limbs, up to 60 centimeters long, perform the same functions as those of modern boa constrictors. They're used to holding the partner during mating. In modern whales, these hind limbs are almost completely absent. The breathing hole in basilosaurs was located much closer to the head. As cetaceans evolved, it moved to the back. There's also considerable debate among scientists about whether basilosaurs could dive as deep as modern whales. It's believed that there's not enough space in their skull to accommodate sound location organs. Therefore, most likely they lived in the upper layers of water. The prey of basilosaurs included various types of fish and shellfish, as well as sharks, which were much smaller than these ancient whales. Despite that, sharks appeared about 400 million years ago. Since those times, they have not changed much in evolutionary terms. The size of these predatory cartilaginous fish changed mainly from era to era. They tried to compete with gnathostomes in the Devonian period, lived next to the aquatic lizards of the Mesozoic, and hid from predatory basilosaurs at the junction of the Paleogene and Eocene. But 28 million years ago, a super predator appeared among sharks. We are, of course, talking about the megalodon. This giant shark, according to some estimates, could be up to 20 meters long. Now, cetacean mammals have become easy prey for the megalodon, but about 2.5 million years ago, these giants went extinct. Perhaps the separation of the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans forced the whales to migrate to colder waters, and megalodons were adapted to life in warm water and were unable to follow their prey. This forced them to feed on their own young. Total cannibalism led to the rapid degeneration of these predators. There's also the opinion that they could not withstand competition with more organized killer whales or even their relatives, white sharks. Now these animals are the dominant predators of the world's oceans. Among the predatory cetaceans, one can recall sperm whales, and among sharks, the whale shark can be noted. Considering the maximum adaptability of sharks to life in water and the duration of their existence on the planet, it can be assumed that they will outlive both modern whales and people. Or perhaps some new predator will decide to follow the path of ancient lizards and whales, returning from land to the ocean. And then in the future, the seas and oceans of our planet will have new owners. Back in the Cambrian geological period, the first predators appeared in the depths of the world's oceans. Some of them climbed to the very top of the food pyramid. It's believed that some creatures came out of the water to escape these super predators. But the evolutionary arms race continued under new conditions of existence. After some time, creatures appeared here too, which can safely be called the masters of prehistoric land. In this issue, we'll talk about such animals and try to understand whether they were all predators. Or, in order to rule the planet, you don't have to eat everyone around you. Subscribe to the Age of Dinosaurs channel, and then you'll be the first to know about the release of new episodes. We also ask everyone to share your opinions in the comments and support the channel with likes. Your activity helps promote our videos according to the platform's algorithms and gives other science enthusiasts the opportunity to see them. The Carboniferous period can be safely called the kingdom of arthropods, the ancestors of modern spiders and scorpions, who until recently terrified the underwater world, began to actively conquer land. Many amphibians and emerging reptiles were easy prey for giant pulmonoscorpions. At that time, insects had quite impressive dimensions. This is due to the higher concentration of oxygen in the atmosphere. The respiratory and circulatory systems of arthropods under these conditions could work more efficiently than they do now. This made it possible to provide oxygen to such large creatures. Pulmonoscorpion, or Pulmonoscorpium, according to the latest data, could have a body length of up to 70 centimeters. At the same time, they could not have large claws. It's believed that these predators relied more on their poisonous sting when hunting. Claws were more often used to cut up helpless prey. These hunters lived in Scotland approximately 338 million years ago. They were described in 1994 by paleontologist Andrew Jerome. At the junction of the Carboniferous and Permian periods, another giant animal lived in Europe and North America. It was a centipede up to 2.5 meters long, called the Arthropleura. However, scientists still continue to argue about its actual size. But even if the Arthropleura was 2 times smaller, its appearance and length are still respectable. In any case, a species of giant centipede, called Arthropleura armata, is the largest invertebrate land animal in the history of the planet. All found fossils of this creature are between 315 and 290 million years old. It's believed that these armored giants weighed up to 50 kilograms. It's unlikely that they had many natural enemies. Their body were protected by many interconnected plates. Each plate covered one of the body segments with a pair of legs. With such dimensions, the centipede had from 112 to 128 legs. The biggest mystery for scientists still remains the diet of Arthropleura. The fact is that not a single fossil's been discovered with an imprint of the oral apparatus of this giant centipede. It's believed that all the remains found are parts of discarded external skeletons. Like many of its relatives, Arthropleura shed their old armor as it grew and acquired a new one. But still, scientists believe that these creatures had large and powerful mandibles. They most likely ate mainly plant foods or carrion. Only adults could hunt smaller animals. It's also believed that the Arthropleura could function as modern butterflies. As the centipede moved through the thickets, it touched plants, and their spores fell to the ground or the back of the animal. So plants of that time could spread to different places. But in the Permian period, the climate on the planet began to change rapidly, and the arthropods gave up their positions. The main predators and the largest herbivores were the so-called beast lizards, or synapsids. Even at the end of the Carboniferous, they were practically no different from their relatives, diapsids. The main difference was the number of temporal foramina in the skull. As the name suggests, diapsids had 2, and synapsids had 1. But these groups took completely different paths in their evolutionary development, and if not for the Great Permian Extinction, no one would have known about any dinosaurs. Synapsids became the real masters of the planet for many millions of years. They acquired a developed jaw apparatus and became warm-blooded. Their limbs began to be located almost under the body, and not on the sides of it. This made them faster and more agile. It's believed that the most recent animal lizards already had the prerequisites for the transition from laying eggs to viviparity. Also, some of the representatives of this group were covered with wool. All these characteristics gave the synapsids a good chance for further development. Less developed cold-blooded diapsids were moved away from rich food resources and lived in desert and semi-desert zones. Among the largest and most powerful animals of that time, several rather interesting groups can be distinguished. The earliest representatives are Biarmassicus. These primitive animal lizards, like many other predatory synapsids, belong to the Therapsid order. They lived on our planet approximately 267 million years ago. Their remains were discovered in Russia, in the Perm territory, the Udmurt Republic, and the Arkhangelsk region. Biarmosis was described in 1960 by Peter Chudinov. Some researchers classify it as a Gorgonops, and some as a Dinocephalus. The length of these predators did not exceed 1.5 meters. They, like many other carnivorous lizards, had elongated upper fangs. In fact, it was these creatures that became the first saber-toothed predators on Earth. Some signs suggest that the Biarmassicus could lead a semi-aquatic lifestyle. They may have been fast and agile pack hunters. Now, you may have a legitimate question. Why can such small animals be called the masters of the sushi of their time? It's worth noting that there were no truly gigantic animals in the Permian period, and even such small animals could be the dominant predators in their habitat, especially if they lived in packs. But theories regularly arise among scientists that the Biarmassicus is not a separate species of animal, but an adolescent stage of development of a larger creature. This animal was named Eotitanosuchus. Its length could reach 4 meters, and its weight exceeded 100 kilograms. If Biarmassicus occupied the ecological niche of modern wolves or jackals, then Eotitanosuchus was a real super predator. At the moment, scientists have at their disposal only one incomplete skeleton of this giant. It was found in the same places where Biarmassicus lived, in the village of Yezovo, Perm territory. Near the same settlement, the remains of creatures were found that, most likely, were the main prey of Biarmassicus and Eotitans. This herbivore is called Estaminaza, and they were all described in 1960 by the same Pyotr Chudinov. The two species of these animals he described were subsequently recognized as one species. It's just that younger individuals did not have pronounced growths on their heads. But still, in the classification of these herbivores, there are now two species, Estaminassicus ural and Estaminassicus amazing. If you believe modern reconstructions, these creatures actually looked amazing. Imagine a 4-meter hippopotamus with fangs and growths on its head. These growths were located both on the top of the head and on the sides of the animal's muzzle. In some ways, they resemble the collars of the later Triceratops. The lateral growths on the skull of Estaminassicus made their heads equal in length and width. Estaminassicus are representatives of another group of synapsids, Dinocephalians. Most of them were carnivores or omnivores. By the standards of the Permian period, there were real giants among them. According to some researchers, the largest representatives of this group could reach 5 meters in length and weigh about 2 tons. A typical representative of the Dinocephalian suborder was the Deuterosaurus. They lived in the Urals in Siberia. The first finds were made on the territory of Bashkiria in the mid-19th century. This animal was described by the Russian naturalist of German origin, Eduard Eichwald, in 1860. Judging by the structure of the teeth, this Dinocephalus was not a pronounced predator. In fact, in the Siberian ecosystems of the Permian period, it performed the function of modern bears. With a body length of up to 2.5 meters and the presence of powerful jaws, they were the rightful owner of the Siberian forests of their time. It's believed that all Dinocephalians turned out to be a dead-end branch of evolution and left no descendants. But the real masters of the land of the Permian period are Gorgonopsians, who appeared approximately 259 million years ago. This suborder has more than 20 genera. Its representatives lived in the territory of modern Europe, Asia, and Africa. Among them were both very small animals and the largest predators of their time. A separate issue is dedicated to these unusual animals on our channel. From it, you can find out why Gorgonopsids became the most advanced predators of their era. After the Permian extinction, giant reptiles became the masters of the planet for almost 200 million years. And, of course, dinosaurs became the rulers of the land. In different parts of the Earth and in different geological periods, the main predators were large carnivorous theropods. These were animals that walked on 2 legs and had powerful jaws. Smaller theropods hunted in packs and posed a serious threat to many herbivores, although the largest of them appeared only towards the end of the Cretaceous period. Among the most terrible predators of the era of dinosaurs are the following animals. Carcharodontosaurus, a genus of North African theropods from the late Cretaceous period, which had a length of more than 13 meters and a mass of up to 15 tons. Giganotosaurus lived in South America approximately 97 to 98 million years ago. They grew up to 13 meters in length, possibly hunted as part of the pack. Spinosaurus had a length of up to 15 meters and a mass of more than 7.5 tons. They lived in North Africa from 112 to 93 million years ago, and they were most likely a piscivore. Tyranotitan, another representative of South America, which had a length of more than 12 meters and a height of up to 4 meters and a mass of about 5 tons. This list can also include maposaurs, carnivores, tarbosaurs, and dozens of other large predators. But the most formidable of them remains the Tyrannosaurus. Some theropods were longer or taller, but the T-Rex was the most massive of the largest predators of the age of dinosaurs. The timing of this video doesn't allow us to describe each of these unique dinosaurs in more detail, but all of them have repeatedly been the heroes of various episodes of our channel. We should not forget about the other giants of the era of dinosaurs, sauropods. These long-necked dinosaurs can also lay claim to the title of masters of the prehistoric land. In all respects, they were superior to the largest predators of that time, and it's very doubtful that any of the theropods actively hunted adult healthy specimens of Argentinosaurus or Patagotitan. These multi-ton giants were not even particularly interested in what was happening under their feet. A similar situation is observed now. There's no more formidable predator on the African savanna than the lion, but a pride of lions will only attack adult elephants if they sense that their prey is vulnerable. Therefore, elephants that survive to adulthood due to their invulnerability can feel like the same kings of the land as large predators. Also, we could say the same about such a group of animals as crocodilomorphs. They cannot be fully considered the rulers of sushi, but it's difficult to find more suitable representatives for the title of masters of ancient freshwater bodies. For example, in Africa and South America, at the end of the Cretaceous period, such super predators were Sarcosidae. These giant crocodiles grew up to 9 meters and weighed 2 to 3 tons. North America had its own crocodilomorphs, Dinosaurs. They had a length of up to 10 to 12 meters and a body weight of up to 8.5 tons. True, only the smallest species of crocodiles managed to survive the Cretaceous-Paleogene extinction. But even now, their descendants terrify both animals living near bodies of water or in the water, and people. After the disappearance of dinosaurs, for a short time the most formidable predators became giant flightless birds. Phororhacos. The largest representatives of this family lived in Argentina from 13 to 20 million years ago. They were about 3 meters tall and weighed up to 300 kilograms. These birds ran no slower than small ungulates and could inflict very serious wounds with their massive beaks. Then, almost throughout the entire planet, mammals began to occupy the upper steps of the food pyramid. These were saber-toothed tigers, giant short-faced bears, carnivorous pigs, entelodonts, and many other predators. Among the herbivorous giants, we can recall mammoths and woolly rhinoceroses, Gigantopithecus, as well as Indracotherium, the largest land mammal in history. For a long time, reptiles tried to compete with mammals for the title of the planet's top predators. They were especially successful in this in South America and Australia. Examples include the giant snake Titanoboa and the huge monitor lizard Megalania. Titanoboa lived in the territory of modern Colombia 58 to 60 million years ago. It was up to 13 meters long and weighed more than a ton. Megalania lived in Australia from 1.6 million to 40,000 years ago. Theoretically, this monitor lizard, 5.5 meters long and weighing up to half a ton, could hunt the first people who settled the continent. Then the legends about dragons immediately have another possible source. And now, in South America, there are quite large anacondas that may be descendants of Titanoboa. And on several islands of the Pacific Ocean, Komodo dragons live, which are still the most dangerous predators there. Now, the largest land predators in different regions are polar bears, as well as brown and large cats. Among herbivores, ungulates are large in size, elephants, rhinoceroses, giraffes, moose, and buffaloes. But the top of the food pyramid is now occupied by the most dangerous and cruel predator, man. This strange primate is not distinguished by its large size or huge fangs, but none of the modern living beings are able to compete with it on equal terms. And even huge monsters from the era of dinosaurs or later eras could defeat people at their current level of development. At the same time, man is not able, due to the peculiarities of our evolution, to rise above all this fuss, like the giant sauropods or Indricotheres from the past. Cruelty and gluttony are inherent in man by nature, and man cannot behave differently. In the videos released on the Dinosaur Age channel, we've repeatedly touched upon the topic of unique animals. Their evolution took, at first glance, a very bizarre path. Such creatures began to appear almost from the moment of the origin of life. Probably with the appearance of the very first single-celled organisms, some of them developed according to their own standards. And, of course, all these oddities have always served one purpose: an attempt to better adapt to changes in the surrounding world. We'll tell you about some of the most famous creatures with unique abilities in a new series of our videos. And today, we'll talk about those animals that lived before dinosaurs began to rule the world. Tiktaalik, a fish on 4 legs. This creature was no longer a fish, but it was still a long way from being a true amphibian. It lived in the distant Devonian period off the coast of modern Canada and Greenland. At that time, these places were home to shallow and fairly warm seas. Perhaps due to the abundance of vegetation, they were more like swamps. Tiktaalik's ancestors had to acquire powerful and long fins to make their way through these thickets. Tiktaalik itself, according to some scientists, were able to move on their flippers along coastal areas. In addition, they had both gills and lungs. This allowed them to spend quite a long time on land. At the same time, on the top of their large triangular head, there was an opening through which the Tiktaaliks could breathe atmospheric air without rising from the water. Despite the fact that the Tiktaalik is classified as a lobe-finned fish, it had a rather unique appearance. It was over 2 to 2.5 meters long. It didn't have a front dorsal fin, but its body was covered with scales. Its large mouth had 2 rows of teeth. There were no connecting plates between the skull and the shoulder girdle. Therefore, Tiktaalik could move its head left and right regardless of the position of its body. Arthropleura, a butterfly of the Carboniferous period. Of course, in reality, Arthropleura was a giant centipede, and butterflies didn't exist at that time. The remains of Arthropleura were found in North America and Scotland. According to scientists, their length could be up to 2.5 meters, due to the fact that the mouth apparatus of these arthropods was never found. For a long time, it was believed that they were active predators. With such dimensions, this isn't surprising. But when analyzing one of the finds, traces of plant food were found in the stomach. This made it possible to assume that the Arthropleuras were inclined to a vegetarian menu. Also, some researchers suggested that these centipedes performed the functions of modern butterflies and participated in the process of plant reproduction. When moving through the thickets, Arthropleura shook off pollen, which was retained in the joints of the scales of their jointed armor. Helicoprion, a fish with a rotating jaw. In 1897, a strange spiral structure was discovered in the late Permian deposits near the city of Krasnofimsk. The geologist and paleontologist Karpinski, who studied it, found out that the strange pointed outgrowths on the spiral were teeth and belonged to a species of cartilaginous fish unknown at that time. He suggested that this strange structure was the upper jaw. The fish itself was named Helicoprion. This name comes from a combination of Greek words that could be translated as twisted saw. Subsequently, other remains of Helicoprions and related fish were found all over the world. After their study, the dental spiral was moved to the lower jaw. Although there's an opinion that it could have been located inside the fish's throat, it's believed that the teeth began to grow from the base of the spiral. As new ones appeared, the old ones were displaced and gradually shed. How this circular saw was actually used is not entirely clear. Some scientists even suggest that it could actually rotate to a certain extent, sawing through tentacles or mollusk shells, as well as causing serious wounds to fish and other marine animals. There's also an opinion that Helicoprions used it to sift through bottom silt. Scientists don't have more complete finds that could shed light on this problem. There's also no other living organisms with a similar structure of the oral apparatus. Therefore, this mystery remains unsolved for now. Carnifex, a bipedal crocodile. Although this crocodilomorph inhabited North America already at the end of the Triassic period and was the same age as the first dinosaurs, we can't help but include it in this issue. Several scattered bones of this distant relative of modern crocodiles were found in North Carolina almost 20 years ago. When described, it received a species name meaning Carolina butcher. Its body length is estimated at almost 3 meters, and its height 1.5. At the same time, it's believed that the found skeleton belonged to a not quite adult individual. The uniqueness of this crocodilomorph was that it most likely moved exclusively on its hind legs. Its front legs were much shorter. However, no evidence of the bloodthirstiness of Carnifex has yet been found. Scientists don't have bones with traces of its bites or fossilized remains of the contents of its stomach. But the method of movement it chose at that time was undoubtedly advanced. It's not for nothing that after the extinction of these two-legged crocodiles, the dominant predators became two-legged dinosaurs, theropods. Dunkleosteus, a monster fish with a toothless mouth. About 360 to 380 million years ago, in the Devonian period, this armored fish was the main predator of the planet. Its length could reach 10 meters, and its weight, 1 ton. The huge head was covered with armor plates and equipped with a terrifying mouth. This mouth also consisted of bone plates and was more like a beak. Instead of teeth, it had the same bone plates. But even with such a primitive mouth apparatus, Dunkleosteus could not worry about the fact that someone in the ocean would be too tough for them. The bite force of their jaws, according to scientists, were simply monstrous. Even modern crocodiles don't have such speed and bite power. And the Devonian seas were mostly inhabited by mollusks and ammonites. Their shells were easily broken by the jaws of Dunkleosteus. Even the sharks that had appeared by that time could not compete with this living torpedo. Dunkleosteus could bite them in half without much effort. The only creature that could harm this fish was another, larger Dunkleosteus. Cynognathus, woolly lizard. The Permian period was the era of theropods. At this time, a large number of creatures appeared that had many features of modern animals, but had not yet lost some features of reptiles. One of these animals was the Cynognathus. It was quite a large animal by the standards of its time. Its body length could exceed 1 meter. At the same time, almost a third of this size fell on the head with a toothy mouth. Their upper jaw was decorated with powerful saber-shaped fangs. Also, in the mouth of these theropods, there were primitive molars. It's due to this structure of the oral apparatus that Cynognathus got their name. Literally, it's translated as dog jaw. The hind legs of the Cynognathus were located under the body, like in mammals, and its forelimbs were still spread apart, like in reptiles. Cynognathus had differentiation of teeth, like in modern mammals. Studies of fossilized skin impressions of Cynognathus show that their entire bodies were covered in hair. They may also have had vibrissae, sensory hairs that act like whiskers, on their faces. Megawatia, the poisonous bear of the Permian period. The presence of poisonous glands among modern mammals is a great rarity, and only reptiles were able to create a developed apparatus for injecting toxin into the body of a victim from vertebrates. But since the synapsids of the late Permian period can be fully considered a transitional form, among them were animals that presumably had a poisonous bite. Megawatia is known only from one maxillary bone and several other scattered bones found in the Nizhny Novgorod and Vladimir regions of Russia. Initially, the finds were attributed to one of the Gorgonopsid species, but upon closer examination, it became clear that scientists had discovered a new predatory therapsid. In terms of size, Megawatia was approximately the same as modern bears, only its head and, accordingly, jaws were larger in relation to the size of the body. But most of all, scientists were attracted by the structure of the fangs of this formidable predator. Firstly, they were triple and grew from a common alveolar sac, and inside the fangs there were separate canals, which presumably led to glands that produced a poisonous toxin. It's impossible to confirm or refute this hypothesis due to insufficient materials, but if it's proven that Megawatia killed or immobilized its victim with poison, then it'll become the most ancient poisonous vertebrate in the history of the planet. The diversity of unique animal species that inhabited our planet at different times doesn't allow us to talk about all of them in one video. As the history of evolution shows, not all of these features allowed living organisms to successfully adapt to changes in living conditions. But the presence of precisely such, sometimes unusual, deviations allowed them to survive and develop further. In fact, the entire history of life from the simplest single-celled to highly developed mammals come down to the fact that certain unique features contributed to their further development and prosperity. Dinosaurs reigned on our planet for almost 200 million years. During this time, a huge number of species of these amazing creatures appeared and disappeared. Some of them, in the course of evolution, acquired unique abilities and acquired unusual external attributes. The purpose of some of them still remains a mystery to scientists. In this issue, we'll tell you about some strange and mysterious animals of the dinosaur age. Some of them have already been mentioned in our previous issues, while others we'll tell you about for the first time. Dilophosaurus, a lizard with increased survivability that could not spit poison. In the first part of Steven Spielberg's film franchise Jurassic Park, viewers were presented with a very strange small dinosaur that could spit poison several meters away. This creature was declared as a Dilophosaurus, but unfortunately, the appearance and unique abilities of this predatory dinosaur turned out to be fiction. Writer Michael Crichton, who created this book series, decided that when restoring the DNA of this species, the genes of one of the poisonous frogs were used. He also gave this dinosaur a chic leathery collar. In this form, Dilophosaurus models are now exhibited even in theme parks with moving dinosaur figures. And as an additional attraction, it pours water from its mouth on passing tourists. In reality, Dilophosaurus were completely different. They lived in the United States and possibly China in the period from 182 to 200 million years ago. Dilophosaurus got its name for a pair of small crests on its head. They were one of the largest predators of their time. They were about 7 meters long and over 2 meters high. They weighed up to 400 kilograms. But these lizards eventually discovered their own superpower. One of the skeletons found showed traces of 8 healed injuries. This indicates the amazing vitality and high regeneration rate of this species. Thanks to these abilities, the Dilophosaurus is listed in the Guinness Book of Records as the dinosaur that received the most injuries. Nothosaurus, fake lizards that lived like seals. The name of these reptiles, which lived almost all over the world for about 210 to 240 million years, translates as fake lizards. In fact, they occupied the niche of modern pinnipeds, and partly also crocodiles and turtles. It's believed that one of the groups of Nothosaurus became the ancestors of the already fully aquatic plesiosaurs. On average, Nothosaurus were 3 to 4 meters long, but there were specimens that reached up to 6 to 7 meters. These were semi-aquatic animals, perfectly adapted for hunting fish and other marine life. Their paws were equipped with membranes, and the teeth of the Nothosaurus had a pointed shape. Their mouth formed a kind of trap for prey. But these animals reproduced on land. There's an assumption that they laid eggs in the coastal sand, like modern turtles. Oryctodromeus, a rabbit from the Cretaceous period. This species was the first of the described dinosaurs that were prone to digging holes. The fact is that in the USA, 3 individuals were found buried under a layer of earth. A more detailed study of the remains allowed us to assume that they died as a result of the collapse of their own hole. The size of the underground chambers and passages corresponded to the dimensions of an adult Oryctodromeus. These were small ornithopods. Their body length was slightly more than 2 meters. They weighed about 20 to 30 kilograms. Their holes had a total length of about 2 meters. They also had side tunnels that were dug by symbiotic animals, that is, smaller creatures that used someone else's hole for safety and ate the remains of the lizard's meal. Moreover, these undoubtedly predatory dinosaurs did not have pronounced adaptations for digging the earth. Their front paws were not very thick. Scientists assumed that they got food by running fast, and bulky front paws would only hinder them in this. This concept is implemented in approximately the same way in modern rabbits. They also live in burrows, but they don't have paws like, for example, a mole. Chaonosaurus, the first lover of nuts and seeds in history. A small dinosaur from China discovered at the end of the 20th century may well be the ancestor of all ceratopsians. Moreover, the giant descendants of Chaonosaurus, which lived at the end of the Jurassic period, are not at all similar to it in appearance or habits. The mass of this dinosaur was no more than 20 kilograms, the body length was 110, and the height was 70 centimeters. Presumably, it was a herding herbivore that moved on 2 legs. It did not yet have an impressive protective collar and long horns. Their place was occupied by small growths in the back of the head. But Chaonosaurus became the earliest known dinosaur with a beak. Scientists associate the presence of this tool with the appearance of the first nuts and other seeds in a hard shell. It turns out that these dinosaurs had at that time the unique ability to crack seeds and nuts. Pegomastax, a cross between a parrot and a porcupine with a built-in tooth sharpener. There have been many strange dinosaurs created over 200 million years, but the Pegomastax can safely claim to be the creature with the most amazing appearance. Its head ended in a short beak and was similar to the head of a modern parrot. At the same time, the body of this small ornithopod was covered with either thin needles or long, dense hairs. Perhaps they served as protection from predators. This dinosaur lived in South Africa about 200 million years ago. It weighed no more than 3 to 4 kilograms and had a body length of about 60 centimeters. One of the most interesting external features of Pegomastax were 4 long fangs protruding from its mouth. At the same time, the dinosaur itself was an herbivore, and the fangs were most likely for digging up roots or cutting plant shoots. Their fangs were positioned in such a way that when the mouth was closed, they sharpened themselves. Linchenicus, an anteater dinosaur that destroyed termite mounds with one finger. The small size of the forelimbs of large predatory theropods has long been a reason for the creation of memes. But the hands of the T-Rex and Carnotaurus look normal compared to what they turned into for the Linchenicus. Although it can be said that this dinosaur did this consciously. It lived in China about 83 million years ago and belonged to the Alvarezsaur family. Its body length barely reached 50 centimeters and it weighed no more than 500 grams. This baby ate various insects and termites. As a result of such a diet, it was forced to learn how to effectively destroy termite mounds and open thick tree bark. To achieve this, Linchenicus's hands lost most of their bones. In fact, instead of hands, it was left with only one finger, which had completely turned into a claw. Hulschgeraptor, a duck with flippers instead of wings. Around 2011, illegally mined samples of an unknown dinosaur's bones in the Mongolian part of the Gobi Desert ended up in private collections. Scientists were able to study them only several years later. This species was named after the Polish paleontologist, Halszka Ozmalska. She was one of the leading experts on Mongolian dinosaurs. The researchers got their hands on a virtually completely preserved skeleton of this small dinosaur. This allowed them to conclude that Hulschgeraptor occupied a rather specific ecological niche. It was a semi-aquatic fish-eating diving dinosaur. Hulschgeraptor was comparable in size to modern mallard ducks. It had a streamlined body and a long goose neck. Its mouth contained a set of sharp, slightly curved teeth designed for catching aquatic inhabitants. It's believed that it could dive for prey to great depths, as modern penguins do. At the same time, the hind legs of the Hulschgeraptor were quite long and thin. This suggests that the dinosaur moved very quickly on land. It was not possible for it to leave the shore forever. After all, like other dinosaurs, it laid eggs. Therefore, the Hulschgeraptor acquired a unique feather for dinosaurs. For ease of swimming, it grew membranes on its front paws and used them in the water. Nigersaurus, a sauropod with replaceable sets of teeth. About 110 million years ago, a rather unusual lizard lived on the territory of modern Nigeria. It's considered a dinosaur with the largest number of teeth. Nigersaurus was discovered more than 50 years ago, but a more detailed description of this species appeared only in the late 90s of the last century, when more samples appeared for study. It was a classic four-legged herbivorous dinosaur with a long neck. Its length was about 9 meters, and its weight was up to 4 tons. Compared to its relatives, the sauropods, Nigersaurus was quite small, but it had some unique features. Firstly, its jaw was located across the head and was much wider than the facial part of the skull. Secondly, the teeth of this dinosaur were located in a kind of battery. Behind each of the front teeth, there were 9 more spare ones. As it grew older and its teeth wore down, Nigersaurus replaced them with new ones. Its upper jaw included 68, and the lower jaw 60 such columns of teeth. These structures are also seen in hadrosaurs and ceratopsians. But Nigersaurus used more than 500 active and replaceable teeth throughout its life. This makes it a record holder not only among dinosaurs, but possibly among all other animals. In the videos released on the Dinosaur Age channel, we never cease to be amazed by the diversity of living organisms that inhabited our planet at different times. In the next episode of the series about animals with unique abilities and features of appearance, we'll talk about those of them that appeared after the dinosaurs. We'll also talk about modern animals whose descendants survived the Cretaceous Paleogene extinction and successfully exist to this day. Of course, as always, only a small number of them fit into the timing of our release. But if the viewers like this format, then we'll continue to talk about animals with superpowers in the future. Doedicurus, an armored knight of the Pleistocene period. At one time, Stegosaurus and Ankylosaurus came up with a special protection from predators. Apparently, the presence of strong dorsal armor and a club on the tail was a fairly effective way to fight toothy monsters. Mammals that captured the planet after the extinction of dinosaurs also decided to use similar methods. One of the brightest representatives of such armored herbivores was Doedicur, or Doedicurus. It was a huge armadillo weighing up to 1.5 tons and reaching 4 meters in length. These giants lived mainly in South and Central America. The last representatives of this family met the first people who settled in their habitats about 10 to 11,000 years ago. Their bodies were covered with impenetrable armor on top, and at the end of the tail, there was a spiked club. It's more reminiscent of a medieval poleaxe, but the scientists who discovered the creature gave it a name meaning tail pistol, referring to its resemblance to the corresponding part of a flower. Ambulocetus, a walking whale that heard without ears. This animal, which lived in the Middle East between 41 and 47 million years ago, is considered to be a transitional form from land creatures to modern cetaceans. Outwardly, Ambulocetus resembled a bizarre cross between a dolphin and a crocodile. Their bodies were covered with fur, and there were membranes between the fingers. They reached 3 meters in length and weighed about 300 kilograms. They were predatory animals that attacked their prey by jumping out of the water, like modern crocodiles do. Ambulocetus lived both near rivers and on the seacoast. It's believed that they swam by bending their bodies in a vertical plane, like modern whales. On land, these animals moved quite awkwardly. Scientists also suggest that they moved from the seas to rivers to give birth and raise offspring. One of the most unique features of Ambulocetus was the structure of their hearing apparatus. They no longer had auricles. Therefore, they could not perceive air vibrations caused by sound waves. It's believed that vibrations of the environment were transmitted through the bones of the skull. Thylacosmolus, a saber-toothed tiger that was dying of hunger. Despite their saber-toothiness, these inhabitants of South America from the late Miocene and early Pliocene were not cats, but marsupials. At the same time, Thylacosmolus had many features of saber-toothed cats. They were up to 140 centimeters long, excluding the tail, and up to 60 centimeters tall. According to various estimates, they weighed from 55 to 110 kilograms. In these parameters, they could be compared with modern inhabitants of this area, jaguars. Thylacosmolus had a long and powerful neck, but at the same time, it's believed that they were quite slow animals. Their low speed didn't allow them to effectively hunt ungulates. Their prey, most likely, was also slow, and therefore well protected. It was for hunting such animals that long saber-shaped fangs were needed. Moreover, the roots of the Thylacosmolus fangs were much longer than the roots of the Smilodon fangs. Such a structure of the dental apparatus left very little room for the brain. In this respect, saber-toothed cats were clearly ahead of their marsupial imitator. The remaining teeth of the Thylacosmolus were very poorly developed and didn't have the ability to recover. Over time, they wore out almost completely. Some researchers suggest that this was the reason for their short lifespan. Adult animals could not normally cut up their prey and simply died of hunger. At the moment, the animals described above are extinct, but even now, a huge number of creatures with unique skills live on our planet. We'd need to have a much longer video to include more detailed descriptions of their abilities. Therefore, we'll try to briefly talk about as many of them as possible. Number 1. The toad-like lizard, which lives on both American continents, squirts a stream of its own blood at its enemy when in danger. Its blood contains a dangerous toxin. The lizard gets it from the ants it feeds on. It's believed that it can use up to a third of its blood reserves as a weapon without any significant danger to its health. But the most amazing thing is that a stream of caustic blood shoots out of the animal's eyes at the enemy. Number 2. Small jellyfish, Teratopsis nutricula, which have spread from the Caribbean Sea to almost the entire planet, are technically immortal. Having received an injury, having found themselves in unfavorable conditions, or simply having reached maturity, these creatures, no more than 5 millimeters in size, attach themselves to the bottom or other surfaces and turn into a polyp. During this state, the cells of its body are renewed. After this, the revived immortal jellyfish can again exist in its original form. Moreover, it can reproduce in both states. In the form of a jellyfish, it reproduces sexually, and in the form of a polyp, by budding. Number 3. Modern centipedes are much smaller than the Arthropleura from the Carboniferous period. Therefore, many of them are poisonous. Toxins are necessary for centipedes to protect themselves from predators. Some species of centipedes are capable of secreting poisons from the cyanide group. For example, the dragon centipede from Southeast Asia not only accumulates poison in large doses, but also smells like almonds. This smell is typical for this type of toxin. And the polychrome aphiloria, recently discovered in the wooded mountains of Virginia, USA, can even spray poison around itself. It's believed that the poison in the body of one centipede is enough to kill 18 birds the size of a pigeon. Like many poisonous creatures, these centipedes are very brightly colored, and some of their non-poisonous relatives diligently copy their coloring for self-defense. Number 4. The common ornamented snake lives in the jungles of Southeast Asia. If the word ornamented can still characterize this animal, then the concept of ordinary doesn't apply to it at all. The fact is that this snake, unlike most of its relatives, can fly. Scientific research has shown that it's able to glide without much difficulty from a height of more than 40 meters. For reference, that's roughly a 12-story building. To fly, it's learned to straighten its ribs and use them as a kind of wing. Number 5. Bedbugs have a rather strange but effective way of reproduction. To fertilize a female, the males of these small parasites don't necessarily have to get their genitals into a specific place. They poke them almost anywhere and simply drill into the female's body, injecting their semen directly into the blood. At the same time, a female fertilized in this way doesn't necessarily lay eggs right away. They're able to choose the most favorable time to become pregnant, and in the future, she won't need to resort to the services of a male again for this. Also, the female's body may contain genetic material from different males, and even if a male gets his genitals into the body of another male during fertilization, the latter automatically changes his sex and continues life as a female. Number 6. The hairy frog lives in some areas of Central Africa, but it's notable not only for the thinnest, leathery growths on the side of its body resembling hairs. It's believed that frogs need this tool for breathing. With their help, they retain air bubbles in the water. The real superpower of the hairy frog, which even some comic book heroes would envy, is the way it protects itself from enemies. When in danger, the bones of the frog's hind legs break and cut through the skin. Such sharp claws can simply scare a predator without resorting to a fight. Having avoided danger, the frog retracts its claws and quickly grows them stronger, and also heals the skin. This is very similar to the ability of one superhero from the Marvel Universe. Number 7. A small shrimp called the pistol shrimp has an average length of about 5 centimeters. At the same time, one of its claws is much larger than the other and can exceed the size of its own body. This claw closes so quickly that it forms an air bubble heated to more than 4,000 degrees Celsius and flying at a speed of about 100 kilometers per hour. When bursting, such bubbles make a very loud sound that can deafen and even kill small fish that this crustacean hunts. Under certain conditions, the pistol shrimp can cause serious injury even to a person. But for this, a person must be in the water a few centimeters away from it. Fortunately, such cases haven't been registered at the moment. However, there are unconfirmed stories about minor bleeding from the finger caused by an attack of this small arthropod.
The entire history of the development of life on Earth is a series of evolutionary explosions and mass extinctions. After some of them, life began its revival almost from scratch. The largest extinction at the moment is considered to be the cataclysm that occurred at the border of the Permian and Triassic periods. Today, we will talk about the causes and consequences of this gigantic environmental disaster. The videos published on the Age of Dinosaurs channel tell about the appearance and disappearance of a wide variety of living organisms. By subscribing to it, you can be the first to know when new videos are released. Your likes and comments will help make our videos more interesting. Also, thanks to the activity of subscribers, more viewers will be able to see them. According to researchers, approximately 90% of marine and 70% of land species disappeared over a relatively short period of time. Some of them were unique and had features that were not characteristic of subsequent species of living beings. But this great extinction event in the history of our planet has also had some positive aspects. The disappearance of animals at the end of the Permian period became a chance for the development of other groups of living organisms. This primarily affected dinosaurs and other reptiles. For the next 185 million years, it was they who became the masters of the globe. But in the shadow of these giant lizards, the first mammals arose and began to develop. This later led to the emergence of such a creature as man. The cause of the extinction, as in other similar cases, was a sharp change in the planetary climate. Most of the inhabitants of Earth simply could not adapt to the new living conditions. But the debate about what triggered climate change continues to rage in the scientific community to this day. If the reason for the extinction of dinosaurs 66 million years ago is visible to the naked eye, it looks like a huge asteroid crater in the Gulf of Mexico. Scientists have not yet found traces of a collision between the Earth and any similar object on the border of the Permian and Triassic periods. Therefore, over the past decades, several theories have been put forward related to the causes of the Permian extinction. Some scientists believed that climate changes at that time were associated with the formation of the supercontinent Pangaea. The appearance of such a large formation changed the topography of the seabed and affected the overall depth of the world's oceans. Also, many researchers note a sharp decrease in oxygen levels in the seas and oceans of that period. Both options may well explain the disappearance of a large number of marine animals and plants, but the inhabitants of land under such conditions would have suffered less, or the process of their extinction would have been extended over a longer period of time. But the most consistent version for many years was prolonged volcanic activity. The bulk of this activity occurred in the so-called Siberian traps. This name was assigned to the lava traces, which have a stepped shape. Trappa can be translated from Swedish as steps. Until 1992, it was believed that intense eruptions had occurred in Siberia for about 5 million years. When a stream of hot magma, called a plume, rises to the surface, it begins to melt the Earth's crust. Something similar, only on a much smaller scale, can now be observed in the Pacific Ocean near the Hawaiian Islands. 250 million years ago, a sea of lava spilled across the expanses of the Siberian plain. Volcanoes released millions of tons of ash and various gases into the atmosphere. All this came back in the form of acid rain. The greenhouse effect has increased. The planet began to gradually warm up, and the amount of oxygen in the atmosphere began to rapidly fall. The worst thing in this case was for the marine inhabitants. An increase in water temperature led to the disappearance of a huge number of a wide variety of microorganisms. At that time, only anaerobic bacteria felt good. These organisms began to actively process sulfur, releasing hydrogen sulfide into the water and atmosphere, which further worsened the situation. But over time, continued warming of the water caused increased decomposition of bottom sediments containing methane. This further increased the greenhouse effect. Now, atmospheric oxygen was also spent on the oxidation of huge amounts of methane. The long-term extinction of almost all terrestrial fauna associated with another weather cataclysm for many years, becoming the main version of events that happened at the end of the Permian period. But in 1992, a group of scientists from the University of Birmingham conducted research in one of the areas of the Italian Alps. Based on the samples taken there, an amazing discovery was made. Traces of the presence of living organisms ceased to be found in the rock layers over a very short period of time. Scientists have reported that the Permian extinction did not last millions, but at best tens of thousands of years. The whole theory of gradual increase in the greenhouse effect and the decrease in the amount of oxygen required serious revision. Again, opinions were voiced about a collision with an unknown large space object. In Australia, a small amount of shock quartz was found. the sand grains of which bore traces of a strong impact. Isotopes of helium and argon with a special structure were discovered in the Antarctic region. It is believed that such compounds were characteristic of carbon-rich meteorites. These celestial bodies existed at the dawn of the solar system. Quite a lot of indirect evidence of the collision of the planet with an asteroid was found, but scientists were unable to find a crater. At this point, the search for the causes of the greatest extinction died down for some time, and all new evidence was based on existing findings and theoretical studies. In particular, some scientists have suggested that in addition to the volcanic activity itself, the burning of coal deposits in Siberia had a great influence on the process. Of course, the coal caught fire precisely under the influence of hot lava, but the combustion products that entered the atmosphere significantly complicated the already difficult situation of the planet. Periods of major volcanic activity closer to us always ended with a decrease in the average annual temperature. For example, scientists recorded a decrease in temperature after the eruption of Mount Pinatubo in the 90s of the last century. A similar situation occurred after the eruptions of the Krakatoa and Tambora volcanoes in the 19th century. This caused crop failure throughout the European continent. In the 17th century, a volcano named Huayna erupted in South America. At the same time, Russia experienced crop failures and severe famine for 3 years. And in the case of the extinction of the dinosaurs, volcanic activity caused by the fall of a meteorite led to the beginning of the next ice age. But at the end of the Permian period, this mechanism worked in reverse. By a strange coincidence, the temperature on Earth increased rather than fell. In the standard scenario of such cataclysms, everything looks quite simple. The curtain of smoke and volcanic dust became impenetrable to the sun's rays. The sun stopped heating the atmosphere and surface of the planet. The climate on Earth becomes much colder, sometimes for quite long periods of time. But about 251 million years ago, nature decided to take a different path. Some scientists believe that the cause of climate warming at the end of the Permian period was the destruction of the ozone layer. In fact, substances that are released during volcanic eruptions are capable of destroying atmospheric ozone molecules. True, this fact does not explain in any way why ultraviolet rays were not absorbed by sulfur dioxide. The amount of sulfuric acid elements released during the eruptions can protect the atmosphere and surface of the planet from exposure to sunlight. Another mystery associated with the Permian extinction contradicts the theory of the death of living organisms from the consequences of volcanic activity. The peak of this activity occurred in areas located in the northern hemisphere, but for some reason, the flora and fauna in the tropical zone of this hemisphere suffered much less than in a similar zone in the southern hemisphere. Interestingly, a large percentage of endangered species occur in the polar regions of the planet. According to scientists, during the disaster, the water at the poles became warmer by about 15 degrees Celsius, and in tropical zones, its temperature increased by 10 to 12 degrees. But given that the water at the poles was initially colder, the subpolar ocean waters still remained more attractive for marine animals. Similar processes are currently taking place on our planet. Global warming has led to marine animals gradually moving to colder waters. That is, in search for more comfortable living conditions. They move from the equator towards the poles. By evolutionary standards, this happens simply instantly. For many species, it took only decades to change habitats. Why didn't the animals of the late Permian period do the same? It is unlikely that evolutionary mechanisms have worked any differently for 250 million years. Some researchers claim that the warming and subsequent extinction was caused by a sharp increase in the concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. But there is also evidence that about 55 million years ago, carbon dioxide levels were about the same level as during the Permian extinction. Even the average annual temperature was only 1 degree lower. Scientists call this period the Paleocene-Eocene maximum. But back then, there was no global extinction. On the contrary, the number of living organisms and the diversity of species increased rapidly. So, was warming really the cause of the greatest extinction event in Earth's history? A large amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere causes intensive plant growth. Following this, the number of herbivores and the predators that eat them increases. There is also more living space for all animals. When there's an excess of carbon dioxide, there are no deserts. All of the above facts indicate that the climate warming that occurred at the end of the Permian period could not cause mass extinction, but it still happened. In 2017, a group of scientists from Switzerland conducted a study of samples collected in China. Based on the results of these studies, they came to the conclusion that traces of the presence of life disappeared from the sediments about 10,000 years earlier than previously thought. It would seem that by the standards of earthly evolution, an extra 10,000 years cannot affect anything. But it is precisely during this time period that the level of the world's oceans decreased. But with strong warming, there should have been more water in it. Based on this data, scientists decided that the extinction occurred during a period of cooling, and warming caused by volcanic activity happened later. Perhaps the answer to the riddle about the causes of the Permian extinction was found at the beginning of the 21st century. Modern research methods have made it possible to discover a rather strange geological formation hidden under the ice of the planet's south pole. It has the shape of a crater with a diameter of about 480 kilometers. The middle part of this crater consists of very dense layers of rock. Such density could have arisen as a result of the fall of a large celestial body. To obtain a crater of such dimensions, the diameter of the asteroid had to at least be 20 kilometers. For comparison, it is worth saying that the diameter of the crater that appeared when the meteorite fell, which put an end to the era of the dinosaurs, is only 180 kilometers. The methods of analysis available to modern scientists say that the age of the Antarctic crater does not exceed 500 million years. But it is impossible to say for sure that it was this meteorite that caused the global catastrophe at the end of the Permian period. Now it is located under a layer of ice more than 1 kilometer thick. But the Siberian traps are located almost on the opposite side of the globe from the impact site. Maybe in the future, scientists will be able to somehow confirm or refute one of the versions. But for now, it is impossible to put a final point on the question of the causes of the Permian extinction. The Cretaceous-Paleogene extinction was not the most massive in the history of our planet, but it is the most famous because it was then that the dinosaurs became extinct. In addition to them, various groups of living beings suffered. The mammals that lived at that time also suffered. Very few were destined to adapt to the new conditions of existence. During the study of the issue of mass extinctions of species, many versions were put forward. Most scientists now agree on how events unfolded 66 million years ago. Subscribe to the Age of Dinosaurs channel. Our videos tell not only about different types of these lizards, but also about other prehistoric animals. By subscribing, you can be the first to know when the next issue is released. With the help of comments and likes, you can help in the development of our channel and its promotion according to the platform's algorithms. Paleontology emerged as a separate branch of science about 200 years ago. Its founder is considered to be the naturalist and zoologist Georges Cuvier. This French aristocrat put forth a revolutionary hypothesis at that time, explaining the extinction of animals. Before this, it was difficult for scientists to imagine that some species of living beings could completely disappear on their own. Cuvier believed that mass extinctions were the result of catastrophes on a planetary scale. Of course, such catastrophes were explained by acts of divine intervention in the development of life. The scientists called the global flood the last of such acts. But the 19th century was a century of rapid development of scientific thought. At that time, it was already well known that many millions of years ago, our planet was inhabited by giant reptiles. In 1851, life-size statues of iguanodons were even exhibited at the World's Fair in London. In 1859, Charles Darwin published his famous work on the origin of species. The theory of the evolution of life on Earth began to gain more and more supporters. The scientific world is divided into two camps on the issue of the causes of the extinction of various species. Some scientists argued that natural disasters contribute to the disappearance of certain living beings. Others believe that extinction occurs gradually under the influence of competition between the animals themselves. Less successful, and therefore extinct, were those who could not quickly adapt to changes in living conditions. It was this point of view that became dominant among most researchers for many years. It has become not very common to talk about the instantaneous extinction of dinosaurs by geological standards. In addition, scientists did not have confirmed information about the catastrophe that happened 65 million years ago. Now, the main version of the extinction of dinosaurs and other species of living beings at the border of the Cretaceous and Paleogene eras is the collision of the planet with a huge meteorite. But before the appearance of real evidence of this theory, many other hypotheses were put forward by various scientists. Cosmic radiation burst. There's a version that the dinosaurs were killed by gamma radiation, which destroyed the ozone layer of the planet. This burst was caused by a supernova explosion or a collision of stars a short distance from Earth. The disappearance of the ozone layer caused dramatic climate change, which caused the extinction of animals, plants, and microorganisms. Active volcanic eruption. The cold snap that led to the extinction of the dinosaurs was caused by the release of millions of tons of volcanic ash into the atmosphere. But not all scientists are sure that the volcanic activity at the end of the Cretaceous period was triggered by a meteorite fall. In their opinion, this could be a natural process, but this made its consequences no less tragic. For several years, the planet could be left with virtually no sunlight. This led to the extinction of plants and some microorganisms. Then herbivores, small animals, and then large predators disappeared. True, opponents of this scenario provide very serious arguments refuting the possibility of such scenarios. They say that any volcanic activity affects the climate gradually, and dinosaurs showed a high level of adaptability during their development. This means that volcanic activity itself could not lead to their rapid disappearance throughout almost the entire territory of the Earth. Changes in sea levels. This phenomenon is called Maastricht regression. It consisted of a decrease in sea level in 180 meters. Similar changes accompanied by all previous mass extinctions. Most often, a decrease in the amount of water in the world's oceans is associated with the growth of glaciers in the polar zones. But some scientists explain the regression of the end of the Cretaceous with the formation of large mountain ranges in Eurasia and Western America. This was a real disaster for marine life. The most densely populated part of the seas and oceans are the coastal shelves. It was they who suddenly found themselves part of the land. Many microorganisms, corals, and fish became extinct. This also affected the numbers of mosasaurs, which were the dominant reptiles of the time. It is noteworthy that ichthyosaurs and plesiosaurs began to disappear long before the events described. Killer plants. One of the most common plant-related dinosaur extinctions is a lack of food due to cold weather. But some scientists put forward another option for the death of the fauna at the end of the Cretaceous period. The fact is, at this time, flowering plants were already actively spreading across the planet. They contained alkaloids that became poison for dinosaurs. Their digestive system was unable to adapt to the change in food chemistry. Changing the polarity of the planet's magnetic field. It is believed that the Earth's magnetic poles periodically change places. For some time, the entire planet remains without a magnetic field, which serves as a natural barrier to cosmic radiation and holds the atmosphere in place. Some scientists argue that the planet can remain in this state for a millennia. This is accompanied by enormous natural disasters, killing living nature or leading to the appearance of mutations. Tectonic shifts. At the end of the age of the dinosaurs, the continents had not yet taken their current places. Their active drift continued. This was accompanied by a shift in the boundaries of water and land, drying up of inland water bodies, and climate change. Also, the movement of tectonic plates caused volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, and other disasters. A number of researchers claim that dinosaurs did not have enough time to adapt to new conditions. Problems with offspring. Don't forget that dinosaurs were reptiles at their core. Despite the fact that many of them were covered with feathers and some had already become warm-blooded, they continued to lay eggs. The sex of newborn dinosaurs may have depended on environmental temperature. Similar phenomena are observed in some species of modern crocodiles. If there was a cold snap at the end of the Cretaceous, then only females could hatch from eggs. Considering that the cooling lasted for more than 1 year, reproduction could have slowed down significantly. This eventually led to the gradual extinction of many species of dinosaurs. The weak point of this theory is that along with dinosaurs, a large number of completely different animals became extinct. Mammals of that time also suffered greatly, and the sex of their offspring should not have depended on climate in any way. Mysterious epidemic. There's an assumption that the reason for the extinction of dinosaurs was the emergence of new types of deadly viruses. Scientists believe that they were unable to develop immunity to these diseases in time. It is difficult to imagine that in a relatively short period of time, the pandemic had spread throughout the world. Dinosaur populations on different continents are unlikely to have had active contact with each other, but it's also difficult to assume that disease equally affects not only land, but also sea and air reptiles. Better competitors. It is known by the end of the era of dinosaurs, many different species of mammals lived on Earth. They were much more adapted to life in cold climates. True, even the largest of them did not exceed modern badgers in size. But some scientists suggest that the main prey of predatory and omnivorous mammals were dinosaur eggs. This could lead to the degeneration of populations of even the largest lizards. It is possible that dinosaur eggshells became stronger to protect against such a threat. But because of this, not all the cubs could get out of them on their own. Researchers also expressed the opinion that the presence of animals that actively fed on eggs influenced the change in the habits of the dinosaurs themselves. It is believed that dinosaurs were not good parents. They did not raise their young and did not even monitor their clutches. But the parental instincts of the latest dinosaurs were much stronger. Many of them built nests and protected newborn cubs. Also, some scientists associated the appearance of plumage with the need to hatch eggs. Global evolutionary experiment. This theory is more of a conspiracy theory than science. In certain, often pseudo-scientific circles, versions of controlled evolutions are put forward. Allegedly, the entire process of the development of life on the planet is part of a global experiment of unknown creatures or some higher intelligence, and every extinction is the consequence of the unsuccessful development of this experiment. Followers of this conspiracy should also think about the fate of humanity. Perhaps soon extraterrestrial intelligence will understand that the experiment with humanity also did not achieve the desired results, and then the test site in the form of planet Earth will be cleared for the next attempt. But most of the proposed causes of the global extinction of life on Earth could be a consequence of the fall of a large meteorite. Quite a number of serious scientific facts have now been collected to support this theory. The first suspicions about meteorite bombardment of the planet's surface were voiced in 1979 by paleontologist Luis Alvarez. At an international conference in Copenhagen, he presented a report on the increased content of iridium in sediments of the corresponding age. He discovered them in 1977 while examining rock samples in the Italian Alps. Iridium is a rare earth metal. Previously, it had only been found in such quantities in the remains of asteroids. And in 1978, near the Mexican city of Chicxulub, a round crater with a diameter of about 150 kilometers was discovered. At that time, scientists knew of more than 50 craters of different sizes, but their origins remained controversial. The fact is that the craters that appeared many millions of years ago were not so pronounced by the period being described. For comparison, you can look at the surface of the Moon. This object appeared long before the extinction of the dinosaurs, breaking away from the Earth, but the Moon has no atmosphere or liquid water. Because of this, virtually no geological changes occur on its surface. The boundaries of the crater in Mexico can still only be seen due to its enormous size. The scale of the catastrophe that befell the planet after his fall was also enormous. In 1981, at a conference in the American state of Utah, other scientists also spoke about the presence of iridium deposits. This metal was present in rock samples about 66 million years old, taken from Scandinavia to New Zealand. Alvarez's theory has found a large number of followers, but there were also those who tried to prove the opposite. Interest in studying the layers of the end of the Cretaceous period has increased among both the former and the latter. It was then that the decrease in the level of the world's oceans, a cooling of the climate, the activation of volcanoes, and other facts were revealed. In general, the extinction process, which took several million years, can be described as follows. A meteorite falling into the ocean caused a huge wave. A tsunami up to 100 meters high washed away vast coastal areas. A blast wave of gigantic power circled the globe several times. All this was accompanied by fires, earthquakes, and eruptions. Hundreds of millions of tons of rock, volcanic ash, and various gases rose into the air. Recent studies say that at the site of the meteorite fall, there were deposits of silicate rocks, their particles ranging in size from 0.8 to 8 micrometers, raised into the air, becoming an insurmountable obstacle to the sun's rays. Modeling of this situation showed the volcanic ash and other consequences of eruptions are not capable of creating such a density. According to scientists, permanent weather could have lasted for 10 to 15 years. Freshwater ecosystems were able to recover faster from the consequences of the disaster. In the seas and oceans, the basis of all life diversity is phytoplankton. Rivers and lakes are saturated with essential microelements, primarily from washed-out rocks. This may explain the survival of freshwater crocodiles, turtles, birds, and bony fish. If you think that these problems have not affected mammals, then you are very mistaken. Their number and diversity of species have decreased to minimal values. They were simply more advanced creatures compared to reptiles. This helped them not only survive in harsh conditions, but also quickly restore their numbers. Mammals quickly occupied the vacant ecological niches and recolonized the planet. Subsequently, the development of one of the surviving species led to the emergence of the new owners of the planet: humans. But by all indicators, another catastrophe on a planetary scale is just around the corner. And who knows, maybe in a few tens of million years, some new creatures will look for the reasons for the extinction of humanity. Or maybe humans can prepare for new challenges and remain the dominant species for another cycle.
According to scientists, our planet's currently over 4.5 billion years old. And for most of this time, it was practically lifeless. Very little time has passed since the appearance of modern animals, and especially people. If we take the entire time of the Earth's existence as 1 year, we'll see how small this period is. In today's issue, we'll try to conduct such an experiment and clearly show how insignificant the role of humanity is in the history of the world. Subscribe to the channel Age of Dinosaurs. This will allow you to be the first to know when we release new videos, and you can leave your comments below about what you've seen before other users. We also encourage everyone to leave a like if you like it. This will help our content a lot and give other science lovers the opportunity to get acquainted with the work we do. If we imagine that the time of our planet's existence is equal to 1 calendar year, then each of its seconds will be equal to approximately 143 years. 1 hour corresponds to 518,000 years, and a day about 12.5 million years. Imagine that before January 1st of this hypothetical year, in the place of the modern planets of the solar system, there was a cluster of rocks, gases, and cosmic dust. This cloud revolved around the already formed sun. Gradually, planets began to form around larger fragments, and with the first second of the new year, the Earth appeared. At that time, its surface was covered with oceans of hot magma and was subjected to constant cosmic bombardment. And on January 3rd, after a collision with a large asteroid or a smaller planet, a fairly large piece broke off from the Earth, but the force of gravity didn't allow it to move away a large distance and go into free flight. This fragment gradually turned into the Moon, the only satellite of our planet. About a month later, February 4th, the surface of the planet cooled and formed a solid crust, but due to the decrease in temperature, water ceased to exist only in the form of steam. The first oceans appeared on Earth. The formation of the atmosphere also began, but inside, lava continued to rage. Eruptions and earthquakes occurred constantly. Modern inhabitants of the planet simply couldn't exist at that time. But even in such harsh conditions, the emergence of living organisms became possible. The first inhabitants of the Earth, which appeared on March 1st, were bacteria. They were single-celled and quite primitive. By April 18th, the formation of the Earth's core was finally completed. Due to its influence, the atmosphere was protected from the effects of solar radiation. Living conditions became much more comfortable. These changes especially affected the seas and oceans. And already on May 20th, the evolutionary development of single-celled organisms led to the emergence of so-called cyanobacteria, or blue-green algae. Their unique ability was to release such a gas as oxygen as a product of their vital activity. They obtained it through photosynthesis, that is, under the influence of sunlight. In the same way, carbon dioxide is converted into oxygen in the green leaves of modern plants. The spread of these new microorganisms for the planet eventually led to the first global extinction in its history. This extinction is commonly called the Huronian, after the place where its most striking traces were found. In sediments corresponding to that era, and in our conventional calendar year it was June 21st, found near Lake Huron in North America, there's evidence of a sharp reduction in oxygen in the atmosphere. In fact, cyanobacteria killed themselves. In the absence of any enemies or negative factors limiting their spread, these microorganisms captured the surfaces of all bodies of water on the planet. Uncontrolled release of oxygen led to irreversible changes in the atmosphere. Methane, which is one of the most important gases involved in the creation of the greenhouse effect, was practically displaced from it. The temperature across the planet dropped sharply. This led to its complete glaciation. Those living organisms that had not previously died from an excess of oxygen harmful to them simply froze. The same fate befell blue-green algae. The decrease in their population allowed the atmosphere to be restored, and gradually the temperature on the Earth's surface reached habitable values. In our calendar, the end of the Huronian glaciation can be marked on July 16. It was the longest, but not the most famous ice age in the history of the planet. On July 23rd, the first multicellular organisms appear, but another global-scale cooling leads to their rapid extinction. The period from August 9th to November 4th has received the unofficial name Boring Billion in science. During these 3 conventional months, several events that are essential for the evolution of living organisms occurred, but in general, the development of life moved evenly and slowly. This is explained by the low content of one of the most important gases in the atmosphere, oxygen. On August 17th, the first single-celled organisms with a nucleus appeared. They were called eukaryotes, and single-celled organisms without a nucleus are called prokaryotes. The presence of a nucleus provided a more progressive way of copying DNA during reproduction. In short, prokaryotes copied their DNA completely without any changes, and each new organism was a clone of the old one. Variability within a species was thus minimal, and in the presence of a nucleus, the DNA chain was copied in parts, and these fragments were folded into a new chain in different ways. This became a step that determined the course of further evolution of all living organisms on the planet. On October 28, a new species of living organisms appeared on the planet, mushrooms. What's noteworthy is that they originated, like all other living organisms, in the ocean. They began to develop land only on November 11th. On November 18th, creatures also appeared in the ocean that became one of the dominant animals on the planet for a long time, starting with a huge variety of sea scorpions of the Cambrian period and ending with modern spiders. All of them were maximally adapted to their living conditions. Nature has gifted arthropods with a huge number of useful adaptations for hunting and protection from dangers. After the boring billion, the rest of our conditional year turned out to be very eventful and diverse. On November 19th, early in the morning, a phenomenon called the Cambrian explosion occurred. The seas and oceans turned out to be densely populated by a variety of different and very numerous species of living creatures. At this time, almost all types of modern living organisms, both marine and terrestrial, were born. By lunchtime of the same day, the first developed animals came out onto land and began to develop new territories for themselves. And closer to the evening of the same November 19th, the Paleozoic era will begin. According to our conventional calendar, it'll last about 3 weeks and end on December 12th. At this time, many events also happened that are worth mentioning in our calendar. On November 24th, plants followed the animals onto land. First, coastal areas, and then more remote areas of land are covered with a green carpet. These plants will subsequently create the atmosphere we're accustomed to and provide our civilization with coal deposits. On November 26, another major extinction occurred. It occurred on the border of the Ordovician and Silurian geological periods. It's believed that this was the first extinction that was provoked by volcanic activity. There's evidence that 2 catastrophic eruptions occurred simultaneously in different parts of the planet. One of them occurred in what's now southern China, and the other in North America. According to some estimates, about 60% of all marine invertebrates were among the extinct species. On November 29, Something that's familiar to us, but unique for its time. A device known as teeth appeared. Fish were the first to use this tool. Then other species of living creatures also used it. The teeth of different animals later acquired many different and sometimes very bizarre forms. Each of their types began to be used to solve specific problems. On December 2nd, our planet suffered another large-scale catastrophe. During the so-called Devonian extinction, a huge number of species of living organisms disappeared from the face of the Earth, including all jawless ones. Before the catastrophe, living conditions were very comfortable. The water temperature in the ocean averaged about 26 degrees. There were no ice caps at the poles yet. The planet was covered with green forests of ferns and other primitive plants. But these plants emitted a huge amount of oxygen into the atmosphere. They were also helped in this by actively growing algae. Rotting plants and the layers of soil destroyed by them washed into the ocean and became food for various microorganisms. Their rapid development was accompanied by the extraction of oxygen from the water. Most sea animals failed to adapt to such a sharp drop in the concentration of the gas vital to them. The oceans were practically empty, and the catastrophe moved into a new phase. Another ice age occurred. After about 2 to 3 days, life was already actively restored. Animals not only repopulated the seas, but also captured the land. On December 5th, all the continents of that time completed their unification into a single supercontinent, Pangaea. December 12th became a tragic day in our conventional calendar. On this date, the Great Permian Extinction falls. It became the most massive in the history of the planet. According to some estimates, up to 96% of all marine fauna and about 73% of land vertebrates died on this day. Losses in the insect class amounted to 86%, but this same day marked the beginning of the Mesozoic era, the age of dinosaurs. The first dinosaurs known to us appeared on December 13th, and after them, around December 15th, the first mammals appeared. For simplicity, it's probably safe to refer to them as mammals. One of these animals was the Morganocodon. Its body length did not exceed 12 to 13 centimeters. Most likely, it was oviparous and led a nocturnal lifestyle. This creature fed on insects. At night, it hunted on the ground or in trees, and during the day, it hid in burrows. On December 16th, Pangaea begins to split into the modern continents we now know today. At the same time, climatic and geological changes led to another mass extinction. Almost half of all animals that lived on Earth die out. It's believed that it was after this Triassic-Jurassic extinction that the total dominance of dinosaurs began. The era of dinosaurs ended only by the evening of December 27th. It's noteworthy that the most popular dinosaurs in popular culture, such as the Tyrannosaurus or Triceratops, appeared only in the middle of this day. According to the most common version, the cause of the global cataclysm that killed the dinosaurs was the fall of a huge meteorite. Its crater's located in the Gulf of Mexico, and its size is about 300 kilometers. This event ends the Mesozoic and begins the Cenozoic era, in which we still live. All the animals we're familiar with now appear on December 28. By December 30th, the world of plants becomes what it is now. On the same day, the first anthropoid apes appear. The first representative of the genus Homo is born only on the evening of December 31st. The entire subsequent history of mankind takes up a few hours, minutes, and seconds on our calendar. For example, the Heidelberg man, who's considered one of our probable ancestors, began to wander the African savanna just an hour before the new year. At 2318, Neanderthals appear, a dead-end branch of mankind, having lost the battle for survival to our species, which appeared 18 minutes later, at 2336. Despite the fact that the Neanderthals left Africa earlier and settled in Europe, our ancestors turned out to be more adapted and organized. At 2347, modern humans, called Cro-Magnons, populate the Middle East, and at 2351, they reached Southeast Asia, continuing their advance along the islands of the Pacific Ocean towards Australia. It was at this moment that human history as we know it could have been interrupted, practically without having begun. Approximately 10 minutes before the new year, the Toba volcano erupts in what is now known as Indonesia. It was so powerful and intense that it changed the climate across the globe. According to scientists, at that moment, the entire human population on the planet dropped to just 10,000 individuals. But humanity was able to survive and continue its development. At 2353, spoken language appears. At 2354, Homo sapiens appear in Europe. Within 2 minutes, the Neanderthals, displaced into less habitable areas, die out completely or are assimilated by our ancestors. At 2355, a person acquires his first friend and assistant, the domestication of a dog. According to some scientists, this factor could have influenced the victory in the evolutionary race with the Neanderthals. At 2357, people cross the Bering Strait from Asia to North America via a land bridge and begin to populate the New World. At 2358, many animal species are domesticated, and the first permanent settlements appear. In fact, the entire history of human civilization fits into the last minute of this conditional year. At the 17th second was the beginning of the Bronze Age. At the 23rd second, the emergence of writing. At the 27th second, the construction of the Cheops Pyramid in Giza. At 37 seconds, people developed iron production. At the 40th second is considered the date of the foundation of Rome. And another second later, the most ancient religious and philosophical movements arise: Buddhism and Confucianism. At 43 seconds, Alexander the Great captures the Middle East and Central Asia, creating his great empire. A couple of seconds later, the power of the Roman Empire is established throughout the Mediterranean. The next second, Christianity arises. At 48 seconds, the Middle Ages begin. At 49, another world religion arises: Islam. 10 seconds before the new year, an ancient Russian state emerges in Eastern Europe. And 5 seconds later, Columbus discovers America. In the last second of this year, the planet's population increased from 1 to 8 billion people. The Russian Empire and the Soviet Union that replaced it collapsed. 2 world wars and man's entry into space occurred, and the internet was invented, thanks to which you can see this video. In this conditional second, many events happened that turned the world upside down and shook humanity. But this year will soon end, and what the future history of our planet will be determined by us, the people living in the next second of history. It's up to us to now decide whether another global extinction will occur, whether new wars will break out, or new great discoveries will be made, and humanity will continue to spread beyond the borders of one planet. Many opponents of the theory of evolution cite one very interesting argument as proof of their rightness. They wonder, why don't modern apes evolve into humans now? It's very difficult to explain to these people that this formulation is greatly simplified. In fact, apes and humans shared a common ancestor many millions of years ago. Our ancestors and the ancestors of modern apes evolved under different conditions. As a result, each species acquired its own unique traits and abilities. In one of our previous videos, we already talked about all the known ancestors and relatives of man. Today, we'll try to briefly explain the reasons for the appearance of people exactly as they are now. By subscribing to the Age of Dinosaurs channel, you can be the first to know about the release of the next episode. And your likes and comments will help in the work of the channel's creators and its promotion according to the platform's algorithms. This will allow science lovers to get acquainted with the history of the evolution of different animal species. The main features of modern man, in comparison with his relatives, monkeys are a developed brain, walking on two legs, developed speech, and an almost complete absence of hair on the body. Even though other modern hominids are physically much stronger, our features have helped us become the dominant species on the entire planet. The reason for the transition to upright walking was most likely climate change in the places where our ancestors lived. The sharp decline in forests and the emergence of vast grassy plains forced them to begin to adapt. If you stand on two legs, you could see the approaching danger earlier. Also, if necessary, you could pick up some kind of tool or weapon. And with the loss of body fur, the females also had to carry their cubs in their arms. Before this, they successfully rode on their parents' backs, clinging to the fur. Our closest relatives are chimpanzees. Their genome differs from the human genome by only 6.4%. It's believed that approximately 5 to 6 million years ago, our ancestors dispersed to different regions of Africa. Those who eventually became monkeys found themselves in forested areas. They were adapted to an arboreal lifestyle. They ate mainly plant foods. From an evolutionary point of view, apes are ideally suited for such a life. But the ancestors of the first people had to solve completely different problems. On land, they were easy prey for more adaptable predators. Therefore, it was necessary to develop mechanisms to counter new dangers. Also, in the steppes, there was much less of the usual fruits. It became necessary to learn how to dig up roots, and most importantly, the first primitive people began to hunt other animals. Probably at first, they were small rodents and birds. With the invention of new types of weapons and methods of hunting, man has become the most formidable predator on the planet. The first man-made tools were created by creatures such as Homo habilis. The age of the oldest units found are about 2,300,000 years old. They learned to make simple stone axes. These tools were used for sharpening sticks and cutting meat from prey. With a maximum height of 120 centimeters and a body weight of up to 50 kilograms, surviving in the African savanna was quite difficult. The habilis had to become much smarter. Judging by the structure of the skulls found, they began to undergo serious changes in the brain. The occipital lobe decreased, while the parietal, frontal, and temporal lobes increased. Their brain volume was approximately 650 cubic centimeters. In our brain, the frontal lobe's responsible for conscious movement, as well as speech and writing. The parietal lobe of the brain is responsible for orientation in space. Temporal is involved in the process of creating long-term memory, as well as in processing information coming from the organs of hearing and vision. These changes may indicate that a skilled person began to move better, remember the surrounding environment, and perhaps began to consciously communicate with relatives. The next link on the path from ape to man can be considered a working person or Homo ergaster. The discovery of this species of ancient people greatly complicated the process of studying human development. Before this, it was believed that evolution proceeded in stages, from simpler to more developed. But a discovery made in 1971 in Kenya showed that several species of people lived in the same area at the same time. The age of the find is estimated at approximately 1.5 to 1.8 million years. It was the skeleton of a woman. It's noteworthy that the remains of an Australopithecus were found in the same layers as it. Ergasters could grow up to 180 centimeters in length. At the same time, their brain volume was even greater than that of the habilis. It was approximately 900 cubic centimeters. The frontal lobe increased further. This indicates the possible beginnings of normal speech. The reason for this increase could be an increase in meat consumption. But with the primitive tools they had at the time, it's unlikely that the person working was a successful hunter. With a high probability, these possible ancestors of ours ate carrion, driving away predatory animals from their prey. Homo erectus began the spread of humanity around the world. According to the latest data, it's a descendant of a working person, and the time of its appearance is considered to be approximately 2 million years ago. Between 1.5 and 1 million years ago, this human species moved to the Middle East and then to Europe and Asia. On the island of Java, the descendants of Erectus lived until our direct ancestors, Homo sapiens, appeared in this region. Also, the remains of representatives of this species were found in Germany, China, the Czech Republic, Hungary, and Spain. But it's worth noting that scientists are now dividing the European and Asian branches of development into separate varieties of humans. Heidelberg, a man that lived in Europe, and Sinanthropus, a man that lived in Asia. Erectuses also became the ancestors of the mysterious hobbits from the island of Flores. Unlike all previous species, these people walked completely upright. Habilis and ergasters had a hunched gait. The height of Homo erectus was between 150 to 180 centimeters. The volume of the brain was up to 1,200 cubic centimeters. But outwardly, they did not yet closely resemble a modern person. The chin was sloping. The brow ridges protruded strongly. They lived in small communities of about 35 to 40 individuals. Families were polygamous or harem. Erectus knew how to build houses and used natural fire. They also take care of old and infirm relatives. There are suggestions that in this primitive society there were the beginnings of medicine and culture, and possibly religion. Finally, 250,000 years ago, Homo sapiens, a modern type of man, appeared in Africa. About 100,000 years ago, it began its expansion throughout the world. For some time, in different parts of the planet, they lived simultaneously with other species of people, but gradually there was no one left on Earth except our immediate ancestors. In Europe, about 40,000 years ago, sapiens displaced Neanderthals from habitable places. Scientists are still only guessing about the reasons for the extinction of Habilis and Erectus, but the activity of Homo sapiens is one of the main versions. About 50,000 years ago, people reached Australia on the simplest rafts, and about 15,000 years ago, they moved to America along the frozen Bering Strait. These people were practically no different from us in appearance. They knew how to make fairly high-quality tools and weapons from stone, wood, and bone, sewed clothes for themselves, and built homes. They were no different from us either in behavior or mental abilities. And they certainly didn't resemble their ape-like ancestors, who decided to exchange life in the forest for the African savannas. The very concept of man for us is rather philosophical in nature. From a biological point of view, humans are a species of primate. And in fact, we don't have many differences from the same chimpanzees. But it's these differences that have made our species the most successful in competing for the top of the food pyramid. Let's try to briefly characterize the features that distinguish humans from monkeys. Bipedalism, or walking on two legs. Scientists suggest that upright walking distinguished our ancestors, who lived about 6 to 7 million years ago in the vastness of the African continent. Bipedalism was characteristic of all known species of Australopithecus and their predecessors. Ardipithecus. The remains of the so-called Sahelanthropus, found in the vicinity of Lake Chad, don't contain the bones of the lower extremities. But judging by the structure of the skull characteristic of other species of people, it could be assumed that this creature already walked on two legs. The occipital bones, to which the neck muscles are attached, of this primitive man were flattened. This suggests that his body more often took a vertical position, relying only on his legs. Opponents of this theory say that the bones of the back of the head could have been damaged after the death of Sahelanthropus. But even modern apes walk on two legs when necessary. This may indicate that the rudiments of this method of movement began to form even before the division of our common ancestors into separate branches of development. Articulate speech. It's the ability to communicate using meaningful sounds that are one of the many characteristic features of people. Of course, many animals use this method of communication, but our speech is much more varied and effective. It's difficult to understand which of our ancestors was the first to master this important skill. Scientists do have their bones at their disposal, but it's almost impossible to draw any conclusions from them. A part of the cerebral cortex called Broca's area is responsible for speech, but chimpanzees also have it. Although their Broca center is only responsible for facial expressions, we can definitely say that Neanderthals actively use speech. In addition to the necessary brain structure, they also had the corresponding genes. Genetic analysis of the remains of earlier human species is difficult due to their great distance in time. RAM. When solving various practical and theoretical problems, we are able to simultaneously operate with several objects. Moreover, information about each of them stored in a separate area of our brain. It's believed that the average person's RAM is capable of holding up to 7 objects. For example, when hammering a nail, we're dealing with 2 to 3 objects at a time: a hammer, a nail, and the material into which it's driven. The chimpanzees closest to us can crack nuts using a stone, They can also use any object, such as an anvil, to do this. But their brains are not capable of solving a more complex problem or, moreover, proving a theorem using 5 to 6 objects. Special hormones. In all primates, hormones such as endorphins are responsible for some memory-related functions. They not only regulate some emotions, but also contribute to the memorization of information. The body produces this hormone from a special protein, prodynorphin, but in humans and chimpanzees, the genes responsible for the production of this protein are different. Prodynorphin itself is completely identical in people and their relatives. But thanks to some long-standing mutation, humans produce about 20% more of it. Nutritional features. Primitive people like ergasters or erectus certainly already used fire. But the big question is whether they could have extracted it themselves. But sapiens and Neanderthals definitely knew how to make fires without the help of lightning or volcanoes. And this factor, in any case, became one of the most important in human evolution. Experiments conducted on animals showed that those who eat thermally processed meat gain weight faster. And if this meat is also passed through a meat grinder, then the process goes even faster. Our ancestors constantly increased in size throughout their evolution. Along with this, the volume of the brain also increased. It's not yet known exactly how earlier species of people ate, but an analysis of the remains of Neanderthals showed that their diet consisted exclusively of meat, and Homo sapiens turned out to be generalists. They ate both plant, foods, and fish. This could have also impacted their victory in the struggle for survival. Features of adolescence. By and large, only humans have the concept of adolescence. At a certain period of time, the cub and its physical characteristics ceases to be much inferior to adults. But for several more years, they remained under the tutelage of more experienced relatives and acquired the skills necessary for survival. Other primates began to reproduce as soon as they reached sexual maturity. According to some data, the situation was approximately the same among the Neanderthals. Moreover, there's a version that they reach puberty at about 7 to 8 years. Lack of personal life experience could lead to higher mortality among the adult population of the communities, whereas sapiens could more seriously prepare their offspring for independent life. We thank everyone who watched this episode to the end. If you're interested in the history of the discovery of various prehistoric creatures, we recommend watching other videos on our channel. You can also find a lot of interesting information about modern animals, the history of our planet, and the problems of human society.